The Galactic Empire had ruled for 3,000 years. From the crystal spires of Centauri Prime to the mining colonies of the Outer Rim, every species bent the knee. Every species except one. Captain Marcus Reed stood on the bridge of the Defiance, Earth's newest battleship, watching the massive Imperial fleet gather at the edge of the Sol system. Hundreds of ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. The sight should have terrified him. Instead, he felt only cold determination. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Imperial flagship," Communications Officer Riley reported. "Put it through." The hologram of Admiral Vex materialized before them. The alien's 6 eyes gleamed with arrogance, his scaled hide reflecting the bridge lights. Behind him, Marcus could see the vast command center of the Empire's most powerful dreadnought. "Human. Captain." Vex's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "I am Admiral Vex of the 9th Imperial Fleet. You will surrender your system immediately, or face complete annihilation." Marcus stepped forward, his uniform crisped despite the tension. "This is Captain Reed of the Earth Defense Force. Admiral, you're trespassing in human space. Turn your fleet around and leave. This is your only warning." Vex's laugh was like grinding metal. "Warning? You dare threaten the Empire? We have conquered 1,000 worlds, destroyed countless fleets. Your primitive ships are nothing before." "Our might, maybe," Marcus replied calmly. "But this is Earth. This is our home, and we don't back down." The alien's expression shifted from amusement to confusion. In 3 millennia, no species had ever refused to surrender when faced with the full might of an Imperial fleet. Not once. "You cannot be serious," Vex said. "We have studied your species. You are divided, weak. You fight among yourselves over resources, territory, beliefs. You cannot possibly stand against us." Marcus felt the eyes of his crew upon him. In the distance, he knew millions of humans across the system were watching this transmission. Earth colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan, the mining stations in the asteroid belt, the research outposts near Jupiter, all of them waiting for his response. "You're right about one thing, Admiral," Marcus said. "We do fight among ourselves. We argue, we disagree, we compete. But there's something you don't understand about humans." He paused, meeting Vex's alien gaze directly. "Touch our home, threaten. Our families, and all those divisions disappear. We become something else entirely." Behind Marcus, the tactical display showed Earth's defense fleet taking position. 300 ships built in the last decade as humanity had watched the Empire's expansion with growing alarm. They were smaller than the Imperial vessels, but they carried something the Empire had never encountered: the desperate fury of a cornered species fighting for survival. "You have 1 hour to withdraw from our system," Marcus continued. "After that, we'll consider your presence an act of war." Vex's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was the alien equivalent of laughter. 1 hour? "Human, I could destroy your pathetic fleet in minutes. Your planet's surface could be glass before your sun sets." "Maybe," Marcus repeated, "but it won't be easy, and it won't be free. We've been preparing for this day for 50 years, ever since we learned the Empire existed. Every human ship out there is crewed by volunteers. Every weapon system is operated by someone fighting for their children's future. You want Earth? Come and take it." The transmission ended abruptly as Vex cut the connection. On the bridge of the Defiance, silence fell like a heavy blanket. Through the viewports, the Imperial fleet hung in space like predatory birds, dark, shapes blotting out the stars. "Sir," Riley said quietly, "long-range sensors are detecting movement in the Imperial formation." "They're advancing." Marcus nodded grimly. He had known this moment would come eventually. Humanity had watched the Empire's expansion across the galaxy, had seen world after world fall to their overwhelming might. When first contact had been made 50 years ago, Earth's leaders had understood immediately the Empire would come for them eventually. The question had never been if, but when. All ships, Marcus commanded, his voice carrying across the communication channels to every human vessel in the system. Battle stations. Remember what we're fighting for. Remember who we are. As the Imperial fleet began its approach, Marcus thought of his daughter on Earth, probably watching the news feeds with her mother. He thought of the billions of humans who had never asked for this war, but would fight it anyway. The Empire had made a fundamental error in their calculations. They had never faced humanity before. The hour was almost up. Asterisk. The battle began at 1427. Earth Standard Time. Admiral Vex had expected the humans to scatter when his fleet opened fire. Instead, they did something that defied 3,000 years of Imperial experience. They charged. The first wave of human fighters screamed toward the Imperial line at maximum burn, their pilots pushing engines beyond safe limits. These weren't the careful, measured tactics the Empire was used to. This was pure aggression, born of desperation and fueled by rage. Lieutenant Tom Hayes flew his fighter, Vengeance, straight into the teeth of the Imperial formation. Around him, 200 other pilots did the same. They were outnumbered 10-1, but they had advantages the Empire didn't understand. "This is for Earth," Hayes shouted into his comm as he triggered his weapons. The human fighters weren't just attacking the Imperial ships. They were targeting specific systems with surgical precision. Sensor arrays, weapon hardpoints, engine clusters. They had studied Imperial ship designs for decades, waiting for this moment. The Empire's energy shields flared as human missiles and energy beams found their marks. For the first time in centuries, Imperial ships began taking damage in the opening moments of a battle. Captain Reed watched from the Defiance as his fighters carved through the enemy formation. The tactical display showed red indicators blooming across Imperial hulls. It was working. The humans were actually hurting them. "Sir, the Imperial dreadnought is launching fighters," Tactical Officer Brooks reported. "How many?" 2,000, sir." Reed felt his stomach drop. 2,000 Imperial fighters against his remaining 200. The math was brutal, but the human pilots didn't waver. If anything, they pressed their attack harder. Lieutenant Hayes saw the swarm of enemy fighters approaching and smiled grimly. His fuel was running low, his weapons nearly depleted, but he still had one shot left. "All fighters, this is Hayes," he broadcast. "If you can't make it home, make it count." He turned his fighter toward the nearest Imperial cruiser and pushed his engines to overload. Around him, dozens of other human pilots made the same choice. The Empire had never encountered kamikaze tactics before. The explosions lit up space like new stars. Vex watched in horror as human fighters deliberately crashed into his ships. This wasn't warfare as the Empire understood it. This was something primal, something savage. The humans were fighting like cornered animals, with no regard for their own survival. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost 7 cruisers and 2 battleships. The humans are targeting our weakest points with suicide attacks." "Impossible," Vex snarled. "No civilized species fights this way." That was when the human capital ships opened fire. The Defiance and her sister ships had been waiting for the Imperial formation to close. Now, with their fighters creating chaos among the enemy ranks, they unleashed everything they had. Human weapons were different from Imperial ones. Where the Empire relied on energy shields and massive guns, humanity had developed something else. Kinetic weapons that could punch through energy barriers, guided missiles that could think for themselves, and most terrifying of all, weapons that adapted to their targets. The first salvo from the human fleet caught the Imperials completely off guard. Railgun slugs moving at significant fractions of light speed smashed through shields like they weren't there. The Empire's massive ships, built to overawe enemies into submission, suddenly found themselves vulnerable. Return fire, Vex ordered. All ships, maximum firepower. The Imperial response was devastating. Entire human ships vanished in balls of plasma fire. The cruiser Courage broke apart under concentrated beam fire, taking 300 crew with her. The destroyer Freedom lasted only seconds against an Imperial dreadnought's main guns. But the humans didn't break. Captain Reed felt his ship shudder as enemy fire found their hull. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the lights flickered. Around him, his crew worked with mechanical precision, returning fire even as their ship died around them. Hull breach on decks 7 through 9. Damage control reported. We've lost main engines. Switch to backup power, Reed ordered. Keep firing. Through the viewport, he could see Earth in the distance, a blue marble hanging in the void. His home. His daughter's future. Everything worth fighting for. The Defiance fired her last missile as another Imperial volley tore through her hull. The warhead found its target, the Imperial flagship's bridge dot, as his ship died around him. Captain Reed smiled. The Empire had drawn first blood, but humanity had shown them something they'd never seen before, a species that would rather die than surrender. The real battle was just beginning. The debris field around Earth told the story of humanity's first real battle against the Empire. Twisted metal from both fleets drifted in the void, a graveyard of ambition and desperation. Admiral Vex survived the destruction of his flagship, evacuated to a secondary command ship as his bridge crew died around him. The sight of Earth still hung before him, tantalizingly close, yet somehow further away than ever. He had lost nearly half his fleet, something that should have been impossible. Against a primitive species, the humans had been devastated too. Of their 300 ships, barely 50 remained combat capable. But they held the line. On Earth's surface, the news feeds showed the same story to billions of anxious faces. Humanity had bloodied the Empire's nose, but at a terrible cost. The names of the dead scrolled endlessly. Captain Reed of the Defiance, Lieutenant Hayes and his fighter squadron, Commander Park of the Resolution. Heroes all, but heroes who would never come home. President Chun addressed the world from the emergency command center deep beneath Geneva. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, but her voice remained steady. Citizens of Earth, of Mars, of every human colony, she began. Today we face the greatest threat in our species' history. Today we showed the galaxy that humanity will not go. Quietly into the dark. In the ruins of the orbital defense platform, Chief Engineer Davis worked frantically to restore the quantum communication array. Earth needed to send a message, not just to their own colonies, but to every species in the galaxy that had ever suffered under Imperial rule. The message was simple. Resistance was possible. Admiral Vex regrouped his remaining forces, pulling back to the edge of the system. His tactical officers reported damage assessments and casualty figures that seemed impossible. No species had ever inflicted such losses on an Imperial fleet in the opening engagement of a conquest. Sir, his intelligence officer approached carefully. We've intercepted human communications. They're broadcasting details of the battle to their outer colonies. Attempting to rally reinforcements, Vex nodded. How long until our own reinforcements arrive? The 7th Fleet is 3 days out, Admiral. But sir, the officer hesitated. Command is questioning our initial assessment. They want to know how we lost so many ships to a primitive species. Vex's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Empire measured success by swift, overwhelming victory. Prolonged campaigns were seen as failures of leadership. His career, perhaps his life, now hung on conquering this single world. But the humans had shown they wouldn't surrender, wouldn't break, wouldn't run. They fought with a ferocity that bordered on insanity, throwing themselves at impossible odds. Without hesitation, it was something the Empire had never encountered in 3 millennia of conquest. On Mars, General Rodriguez received the casualty reports from the Sol Defense Fleet. Her red dust-covered command center buzzed with activity, as staff officers coordinated the colony's response. Mars had its own fleet smaller than Earth's, but crewed by people who had just watched their homeworld barely survive annihilation. "Ma'am," her aide reported, "all Martian ships are reporting ready. We can be at Earth in 18 hours. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The surviving Earth ships were in no condition for another battle. Mars colony's 15 vessels wouldn't tip the balance significantly, but they would buy time. Time for the outer colonies to organize, time for Earth's shipyards to launch whatever they could build, time to send another message to the galaxy. "Launch all ships," she ordered. "Tell them we're coming." In the asteroid belt, the mining crews received the same broadcast Earth had sent across human space. These weren't soldiers. They were engineers, miners, technicians. But they had ships, industrial equipment, and most importantly, they had something to lose. Station Chief Williams looked at the converted ore haulers and construction vessels his people had been arming for the past 2 days. They weren't warships, but they could fight. They would fight. "How many volunteers?" he asked his deputy. "All of them, Chief. Every single one?" Back at Earth, the battered remnants of the defense fleet took stock. Ammunition was running low. Ships needed repair, and the dead numbered in the tens of thousands. But they had proven something crucial to themselves in the galaxy. The Empire could be hurt. Commander Sarah Kim, now the senior surviving naval officer, stood in the emergency command center aboard the damaged battleship Perseverance. Through the viewport, she could see the lights of Earth's cities, still shining despite the devastation above. Her com officer looked up from his station. "Ma'am, we're receiving signals from across human space. Mars colony fleet is inbound. Asteroid belt mining ships are organizing. Even the research stations near Jupiter are reporting they'll fight." Kim nodded grimly. The Empire had wanted to face divided, primitive humans. Instead, they had created something that had never existed before in human history. A truly united species with a common enemy. The cost had been terrible, but the line had been drawn. Now both sides would discover what humanity was truly capable of when pushed to the brink. The Martian fleet arrived like angels of death, their red-painted hulls gleaming in the light of Sol as they formed up with Earth's survivors. General Rodriguez had pushed her ships beyond safe limits to reach the battle, and now 15 fresh vessels joined the 50 battered defenders. It wasn't enough. Everyone knew it wasn't enough. But Admiral Vex, watching from his command ship, felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of conquest: uncertainty. The humans should be suing for peace by now, offering tribute, begging for mercy. Instead, more ships kept arriving. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're detecting multiple approach vectors. The humans have ships coming from the asteroid belt, from Jupiter's moons, even from their research stations." Vex studied the tactical display with growing disbelief. These weren't military vessels. They were converted civilian ships, mining. Haulers, research vessels, even passenger transports. The humans were throwing everything they had at him. "How many?" he asked. "Current count is over 200 ships, sir. But most appear to be civilian conversions." 200 ships. It should have been laughable. Civilian vessels against the might of the Imperial Navy. But Vex had learned not to underestimate human desperation. On the bridge of the converted ore hauler Iron Will, Station Chief Williams watched his improvised fleet take position. His ship had been mining asteroids just a week ago. Now it carried every explosive device his crews could manufacture, ready to ram Imperial vessels if necessary. "Chief," his makeshift tactical officer called out, "Earth Command is hailing us." Commander Kim's image appeared in the hologram projector they'd salvaged from a communications satellite. Behind her, Williams could see the battle-scarred bridge of the Perseverance. "Chief Williams," Kim said, "I need to be clear about what we're facing. The Imperial reinforcements will arrive in less than 24 hours. When they do, we'll be outnumbered 20-1. "Understood, Commander," Williams replied. "What are your orders?" "Make them pay for every inch. Every ship they destroy, every life they take, needs to cost them. The galaxy is watching this battle. If we can show that the Empire can be hurt, maybe others will join us." Williams nodded. Around him, his crew of miners and engineers worked at stations they'd learned to operate in the past week. They weren't soldiers, but they were humans. That was enough. The battle resumed with a ferocity that surprised even the veterans. The human civilian fleet attacked with the same suicidal determination their military had shown. Ore haulers rammed Imperial cruisers. Research vessels detonated their reactors against enemy hulls. Passenger ships launched every missile they could carry before closing to point-blank range. Admiral Vex watched his casualty reports climb with growing horror. He was winning. The humans were dying by the thousands, but at a cost the Empire had never paid before. Each human ship took Imperial vessels with them when they died. "Admiral," his aide reported, "Command is demanding an explanation. How are we losing ships to mining vessels?" "Because they're insane," Vex snarled. "They fight like their entire species depends on victory." "Doesn't it, sir?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. The Empire had always conquered through overwhelming force and the threat of annihilation. Species surrendered, rather than face extinction. But the humans seemed to prefer extinction to surrender. On Earth, President Shun watched the battle feeds with tears streaming down her face. Each explosion represented dozens of human lives, people who had chosen to die, rather than live under Imperial rule. The asteroid miners who had never fired a shot in anger. The research teams who had dedicated their lives to peaceful exploration. All of them choosing to fight. "Madam President," her aide whispered, "we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. Over 30 species have declared their support for humanity." Chun looked up in shock. "Support? What kind of support?" "Most are just statements of solidarity, but the Centauri Republic has declared war on the Empire. The Free Worlds Alliance is mobilizing their fleet. Even some Imperial client states are reporting uprisings." For the first time in days, Chun allowed herself to hope. Humanity's sacrifice was inspiring something the galaxy hadn't seen in 3,000 years. Rebellion. In space, the last human ship from the civilian fleet made its final attack run. The research vessel Discovery had been studying Jupiter's moons just days ago. Now it carried every explosive its crew could find, aimed directly at an Imperial dreadnought. Captain Foster, formerly a peaceful scientist, spoke into his com as enemy fire tore through his ship's hull. "This is for everyone who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom." The explosion lit up space like a miniature sun. When the Imperial reinforcements arrived 6 hours later, they found something unprecedented. A debris field containing the wreckage of over 100 Imperial ships, destroyed by a species that had never conquered anything beyond their own star system. The galaxy had learned a new word: defiance. The Second Battle of Sol began at dawn on the third day, as Earth's damaged sun cast long shadows across the debris field that had become humanity's monument to defiance. Admiral Vex's reinforcements, 300 fresh Imperial ships, arrived to find a solar system that refused to die quietly. But humanity's fleet was gone. The last defenders had fallen during the night, taking 17 more Imperial vessels. With them, Earth hung defenseless in the void, her orbital platforms destroyed, her cities preparing for bombardment. Admiral Vex should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt hollow. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth." President Chun's image appeared in the hologram, transmitted from the emergency bunker. Beneath Geneva, her face was calm, resigned, but her eyes held something that made Vex's scales crawl. Pity. "Admiral," she began, "you've won your battle. Earth's defenses are gone. Our ships are destroyed. You can glass our planet whenever you choose." Vex nodded curtly. "Then you surrender?" Chun smiled sadly. "No, Admiral. We don't surrender. We never surrendered. And because of that, you've already lost the war." Before Vex could respond, his tactical officer called out in alarm. "Sir, massive hyperspace signatures. Multiple fleets dropping out of FTL." The display screen filled with new contacts as ship after ship materialized around Sol. The Centauri Republic's geometric vessels, the Free Worlds Alliance's converted merchant marines, and dozens of smaller fleets from species that had thrown off Imperial rule in the past 72 hours. "How many?" Vex whispered. "Over 2,000 ships, sir. And more arriving every minute." President Chun's smile widened. "Did you think we were fighting just for Earth, Admiral? We were fighting for an idea. The idea that a species doesn't have to bow to you. That freedom's worth dying for. That the strong don't have the right to enslave the weak." The alien admiral stared at the tactical display as more and more ships appeared. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were throwing off their chains. Client states were declaring independence. The empire that had seemed eternal was cracking apart. 3 days, Chun continued. That's all it took. 3 days of humans refusing to surrender, and the entire galaxy remembered what you made them forget. That empires fall when people stop being afraid. Captain Nova of the Centauri Republic Fleet opened communications with the Imperial forces. Her crystalline form shimmered in the hologram as she spoke in perfect Imperial standard. "Admiral Vex, I am Captain Nova of the Free Centauri Navy. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender your fleet, and you will be treated according to the laws of war." Vex felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not of death. He had faced that many times, but of the collapse of everything he had served. The Empire was 3,000 years old. It couldn't end like this. "This is impossible," he said to no one in particular. "One primitive species can't destroy an empire." "They didn't destroy it," his intelligence officer said quietly. "They inspired others to destroy it themselves." On Earth, the celebrations were muted by the knowledge of what the victory had cost. Nearly 100,000 humans had died in the 3-day battle. The orbital cities were ruins. The defense fleet was gone. But humanity had proven something that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The Galactic Empire, faced with a rebellion spanning dozens of worlds, began to fragment. Some fleets surrendered. Others fought desperate holding actions. A few disappeared into the unknown regions beyond the galactic rim. Admiral Vex, his fleet surrounded and his empire crumbling, made one final transmission to Earth. "President Chun," he said, his voice heavy with something that might have been respect. "I have spent my life serving the Empire. I believed in its strength, its right to rule. You have shown me that there are things stronger than force." "Yes, Admiral," Chun replied. "There are." Vex closed his eyes. "I surrender my fleet to the combined forces. I ask only that my crews be treated with honor. They will be, Admiral. They will be." As the Imperial ships powered down their weapons and prepared for boarding, President Chun stepped out of the bunker for the first time in days. Above her, the stars shone with a different light, no longer the cold, distant suns of an empire, but the warm glow of freedom. Humanity had drawn a line in the stars and dared the Empire to cross it. The Empire had crossed it and discovered that some lines, once drawn in blood and sacrifice, become permanent boundaries that can never be erased. The galaxy was free, and it had humanity to thank for remembering how to fight for that freedom. In the end, that was the most human thing of all.